Welcome back, and we're in June. We're basically halfway through our series of videos where I talk about all the films that I watched in 2019, and this is June 2019. Let's get on. June started with the Star Wars trilogy, the original three episodes, which is episode 4, 5, and 6. And I hadn't seen any of the Star Wars movies before. I had tried watching A New Hope a lot of times, but it was always very boring. But I watched A New Hope, then I watched Empire Strikes Back, and I watched Return of the Jedi, I think in a single day, and it was okay. I I'm very familiar with the sort of the Star Wars universe because it's so embedded in pop culture, but I was never a big fan. I was never really interested in them as much, and whenever I tried watching the films, they were always very boring. So yeah, next I watched Trikal, which is a film by Sham Benegal about a family that lives in sort of Goa during the sort of transition period between Portuguese Goa and when it was sort of made a part of India. And you see this family and you see their struggles with sort of that political scenario happening, and they have a lot of drama in their family happening, but for me it didn't have the kind of impact that I was hoping it would, and it felt like one of the lesser Benegal films. Next I watched It's a Wonderful Life. So I was watching a documentary, I think, about Frank Capra, like a documentary short about Frank Capra, and I was really interested by his filmography and just him being such an influential filmmaker. So I decided I would watch more of his films. So I decided to start with It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Christmas film. It's very interesting. It has a very nice premise. It's the story of a guy who imagines that he's a failure, he has a lot of trouble in life, so he commits suicide, and then there's an angel who shows him what the world would be like if he did not exist. It's a film from 1946, and at this point I don't think there needs to be any spoiler, and it's quite a common, a well-known thing, the plot of the story, but I think it does a really good job, and some of the scenes and some of the lines are very iconic, and it's quite fun. It's a nice watch. It's a very heartwarming kind of film, a film that you can watch with a family, and it's good fun. Next I was Leon the Professional. Now this is, I think, one of the first, or the first film by Natalie Portman, and it's by Luc Besson. It's about this guy Leon who's like an assassin. He's like a hitman, and there's a girl living in his apartment, in his building, and she has trouble, and they just become friends, and it's quite interesting. There are hints, I think, of Lolita, where it does get a little creepy, but because Leon himself is very childlike in his mannerisms despite being a hitman, he's still looking out for good people, so he looks out for her, and it's interesting. Some of the cinematography is quite nice. There are shots which are really well done, and I think there is a very nice through line with the film, with his pot. Like, he has a potted plant which he's really obsessed with, and I think that's a very nice thing. Just watch that film and just pay attention to that pot, because it has a very nice thematic sort of resolution of the film. Next I watched Pather Panchali. So this is a Bengali film from 1955 by Satyajit Ray. This is his first film, like his first feature film. And so Satyajit Ray is one of those pioneers of cinema in India he was one of the first people to bring Indian cinema for foreign audiences, and he did get a lot of flack for that, for being a filmmaker who sort of catered to the foreign audiences, but I think that's just because he was inspired by a lot of foreign cinema, but his work just speaks for itself. It's really incredible. You will see. So the Pather Panchali is the first of a trilogy called the Apu trilogy, and it's one of those films that just stays with you. It has a beautiful soundtrack. It has beautiful music throughout. It has really good performances, and it tells a very heartwarming story. It is quite sad. So the entire trilogy is a lot of tragedies that happen in the life of Apu, and I think this film just shows you a different part of Indian cinema. And I know there are people who are not big fans of Satyajit Ray. Some people say he's very boring, he's very artsy, he's very this, that, he's very foreign, he makes films for foreign audiences. And even in the cinephile circle, there are people who sort of feel that Satyajit Ray is sort of overrated, and other people like Ritwik Ghatak or some of the other people might deserve more recognition. But I think Satyajit Ray is one of those sort of important figures in cinema. So I think that's really incredible. Even today, I think the Apu trilogy is really well regarded, and I think even the Criterion Collection has the Apu trilogy in it, which is a nice thing to have. And I think it's a good waypoint into, I think the Apu trilogy makes a very nice entryway into Satyajit Ray's other films. And they're just really good films, and you must watch them if you like good cinema. Next was Seven Samurai. So yeah, Seven Samurai is an Akira Kurosawa film, and it's probably the most famous Akira Kurosawa film, and it's a long film, but it never lets you off the hook. It just is incredible. It's about these seven samurai who come together, who form like a group to save or to protect a village from goons from outside. And it's brilliant. The action sequences are incredible. The acting is really good. I think Toshiro Mifune is brilliant, and I think he's at his best in this film. And some of his other films also are like really good. And I think Seven Samurai is just one of those classic films that everyone has to watch. But I think it's just incredible to just watch and rewatch, and you'll find new things every time you watch it. And it just is so layered in its storytelling, and you see a lot of his influences from Western films, from the genre of Westerns, and you see him apply it to this kind of thing. I was also reading his biography, or Kurosawa's biography, and in which he talks about his influences, in which he talks about his previous films, and it's just incredible the way he sort of speaks of cinema, and I think it's really incredible. And I mean, I love the film, man. Next, I watched another Frank Capra film, which is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So this film is again very interesting, because it starts with this gullible protagonist who is who's like a really nice guy who's taken into Washington to become, I think, a senator or a congressman, like a senator, I think. And when he goes to Washington, he's supposed to be like a pawn, like who does nothing, like who's just a silent spectator. But he ends up seeing the sort of the problems in society. He starts seeing the corruption in Washington, and he starts to speak up for it. And I think it has a very nice second act. It does a very nice sort of nice social critique, and I think is very relevant even today. I think the film was made in 1939, and like a good 80 years from then, it still is very relevant today, and I think it's very nice. Next, I watched American History X. Now, this is a film that is a difficult film to watch. Again, it has a lot of social commentary, and you see a lot of sort of issues in society being portrayed in this film. You see a lot of right-wing sort of Nazism, like neo-Nazis in the film. It has an incredible performance by Edward Norton, and it's in black and white, which I always love. And it's a nice film. It has a very tragic story. It is a very difficult film to watch, but I think it does deserve a watch. Next, I watched Children of Heaven by Majid Majidi. It's another Iranian film which is just iconic because it's so sweet and so beautiful. And I mean, it's one of those films that that portrays children so well, and it's just so heartwarming, but also so sad in a lot of ways. But there's always hope in the film, which is incredible, and I really love it. It's just incredibly beautiful, and it's a film. I think this, like A Separation, I think is one of those sort of famous pillars of Iranian cinema, but I think Children of Heaven is more accessible or more approachable. So you can start watching Iranian cinema by starting with Majid Majidi's best film, I think. Next, I watched The Passion of Joan of Arc. Now, this is a very old film, 1928 or 9 or something like that, and yeah, it's a story of Joan of Arc. So it is a little preachy at times, and I personally didn't feel very invested in the story, but it has incredible cinematography. It has really good performances, and it does a really good job of elevating that story to a higher level. Next, I was Singing in the Rain, one of the classic musicals, and it's very interesting. I really like this film because it is a film made in the 50s about the 20s, like the late 20s, when sort of when sound is just coming up in cinema, and it's a nice look at just the industry, the Hollywood industry, and it is a lot of fun. It has just iconic music. It has really great dance, and it's a very, like, again, a classic film. So it's something that will be recommended to you a lot, and it's an easy watch. So you can watch it without a lot of effort being put into doing all of that, and it also looks really beautiful. So no issues there. Next, I watched the second film in the Apu trilogy, which is Aparajito, which means the undefeated, and it's beautiful because it's the second part of the story that started with Pathir Panchali, and so it was based on a book. I can't remember the name of the author of the book, but it was an adaptation of that book, and Satyajit Ray basically split it into the first and the second, the two movies. And I think Parajito is also really beautiful, really haunting in its sort of tragic elements, and incredible performances. Just I can't recommend the Apu trilogy enough, man. It's just so good. And then going from that, I watched some sort of bad cinema. I watched Murder Mystery, which is a Netflix film with Jennifer Aniston and Adam Sandler, and it's not very good, but it's just like mindless, stupid idiocy, and I mean, yeah. After that, I rewatched Tumbad because why not? Because it's brilliant, and you can watch one of my previous videos where I go into the depths of why I love that film so much, and it's really incredible. And just watch Tumbad, just do it already. After that, I watched Dibakar Banerjee's LSD, which is Love, Sex or Dhoka, and it's an interesting film because it is sort of like it's one of those anthology films where there are 3 chapters and they tie together in the end, and it's all about deceit and love and sex and all of that. So it's good. It's certainly better than I had expected it to be, but it's also very unique because it's not the kind of film that you would watch and I think there are so many elements of the film that sort of are still relevant today, are probably more relevant today, and it's really a look at the nasty underbelly of sort of Indian culture, Indian society, and it's an interesting film. And if you have access to it on any streaming platforms, just watch it. It's really good. Next, I watched Lawrence of Arabia. Now, I'm one of those people who doesn't mind watching long films, and Lawrence of Arabia certainly is a very long film, but it's totally worth it. So, Lawrence of Arabia is basically the story of T.E. Lawrence, who was a British army officer, I think. He was also a historian and archaeologist and all of that, and it's a story of him basically helping the Arabian people during the Great War, and he's basically trying to help them overcome the Turks, the Ottoman Turks, and he's British, and it's just a British version of a Western, and it has all of those tropes there as well, and it's so beautiful in its storytelling because it has incredible cinematography. Like, they had to use these particular lenses that had to be specially made for this film because they didn't have they weren't like the lenses available were not long enough, so they had to bring in longer lenses, and by longer I mean like more zoomed in, like telephoto lenses, and they had them custom made, and there are these just hauntingly beautiful visuals of the desert, and a lot of heart as well. There's a very nice video by History Buffs which talks about the historical accuracy and inaccuracies in this film versus the others. It also has incredible editing, and I think David Lean is one of the greats of cinema, and he's a really good director. I mean, of course, and I think Lawrence of Arabia is a difficult film to get into because it's a little daunting to watch a 3.5 hour long film, but once you start, it just keeps you hooked throughout, and you don't feel the runtime at all. It's just extremely beautiful, and I think it's again a classic, so it's something that you have to watch because it's so iconic and so relevant and so important for just the chronology of cinema, and it's just brilliant. Next, I watched American Graffiti. Now, this is a George Lucas film from before the Star Wars films, and it's good. I feel like it's this, so you have American Graffiti, then you have Dazed and Confused, and then you have Everybody Wants Some. It's like these three films talk of the same story, have the same premise, basically just people roaming around on the last day of their high school in cars, and it's the same story but in three different decades, and it's okay. It's not particularly good. I've never been a big fan of George Lucas. I don't think there's a single George Lucas film that I have really liked, but this is okay. Next, I watched Bridesmaids. This is a 2011 American comedy. It's not very funny, but apparently a lot of people like it. I don't. Next, I watched Spirited Away by Miyazaki. It's a Studio Ghibli film. I think it's the most well-known Studio Ghibli film, and it's a brilliant animated film from Japan. It's really incredible, and I think this film shows what an animation film can do that a live action film cannot, which is create an entire world that you completely buy into. And again, storytelling in this film is incredible, like any of the other Miyazaki films, and it's really iconic. It's one of the best animated films. It's one of the best films to come out of Japan, and it's really beautiful. It has really nice sort of elements, and it just works so brilliantly together. I think it's a film that you must watch. Next, I watched Following. Now, this is the first feature film by Christopher Nolan, and it's the most difficult of his films to watch because it's a little slow in its pacing, and it's not as so. The thing about Christopher Nolan is that a lot of his films sort of are structured around a particular gimmick, and I don't say that in a negative way. Like he has a particular like he has like a unique selling point in every film, and like everything else is sort of just surrounding that integral premise, and it just works brilliantly together. But like if you see in Dunkirk, the story is really amazing, the cinematography is really good, the acting is really good, all of those things are very well done, but all of that is elevated by the fact that you have these three different stories being told at in three different timelines. Like one is happening over an hour, one is happening over a day, and one is happening over a week, and all of them are being told together as if it was happening in real time. In a similar way, you have a lot of his other films. Memento, for example, takes place in reverse, but again it adds to the character, and I will talk about Memento sometime in the future. But Following doesn't have that to a large extent, so it doesn't have that Christopher Nolan factor which is supposed to elevate things, so it doesn't get elevated much, but on its own it's still quite good. And you can see the promise and the technical sort of mastery that he has, and the confidence that he has on his subject, and his ability to tell the story. So Following, I think, is a good movie to watch if you're a big fan of Christopher Nolan, to see where he came from. But if you are if you don't care about Christopher Nolan so much, or if you are just a casual watcher of his films, I think it's a film that you can avoid. Next is The Intouchables. Now this is not Untouchables, this is The Intouchables. It's a French film about a man who is paralyzed from the waist down, I think, and he has a helper who comes along who helps him get through things, and it's a good story. I just watched it because it was in the IMDb top 250 list, and the film is decent. It's good. There are moments which are really that really stay with you. There are bits that really make you laugh, and it's quite good. So yeah, good film. Next I watched In the Mood for Love. That one. It's also the wallpaper on my phone because I love that film so much. It's probably one of the best romantic films ever, where all of their romance, all of their all of that emotion is just left unsaid, and all you can see of that is through their gazes, and it's so beautiful. The cinematography is incredible, and if you read about the process through which that film was made, it's unbelievable, the kind of sort of process that they went through. Apparently there was no script, there was no there were no rules, there was no schedule or anything. They would just go, and he would just work with these actors and just make the film. And I mean, Wong Kar-wai is incredible. The film is just absolutely amazing, and it's so hauntingly beautiful. It will not let you sleep, and it's just brilliant. Next, I basically went to the theater to watch two films back to back. One was Toy Story 4, which I didn't like so much. I really liked the previous three films a lot more, and Toy Story 4, while it's good, it's not as good as the other three, and I think it was very unnecessary. Like, I think with the third film, the trilogy was complete, the story was complete, there was no need to carry on that thing. But I mean, merchandising and all of that stuff, studio influence, I mean, it's a Disney Pixar thing, but yeah, I wasn't a very big fan of that film. But after that, I watched Article 15, and it's a film by Anubhav Sinha, and the film is really good. So now, a decade before, has made films like Thus and Ravan, which were utterly bad, just terrible films. But in the time since, he's made Mulk in 2018, which is really good, and he's also made Article 15 in 2019, and it's incredible. So there are so many. The thing is, he gets really serious and he gets down in it, and he talks about the caste system. Basically, the film is centered around the caste system and how sort of all of these things are um, being still propagated in a lot of rural areas, and it brings in a nice perspective, so where your protagonist becomes your audience stand-in to bring you into this world um, which seems absolutely absurd, but but just, that's just the way the world is. And it's very it's very well shot, it's very well directed, and I think it's a good I think this film has really demonstrated that a lot of filmmakers, if they are allowed to tell the stories that they want to rather than being dictated by studios, I think we have a decently good future for Indian cinema. So that brings an end to the films that I saw in June. I watched 27 films, which is not too bad, and yeah, it's a nice, and it's a nice way to round off the first half of the year. And I will try to be more. I will try to be brief with the rest of the films and just get them finished quickly, so we can move on to other series and other projects that I have planned. So stay tuned, and we will have the next video about July, and we will continue this series and end with December, hopefully, and get on to other series. So stay tuned, have fun, watch some of these films that I've recommended, and have a good time at the movies.